Previously on World History and Geography.
During the High Middle Ages, Western Europe was on a comeback, with increasing trade, growing cities, and nations moving toward a central authority. But the 1300s were filled with disasters, both natural and human-made. So by the end of the century, the medieval way of life was beginning to disappear.
And now, our feature presentation.
At the beginning of the 1300s, the Age of Faith, which inspired the building of glorious cathedrals and dreadful wars of conquest, still seemed strong. Soon, however, both the Pope and the Church were in desperate trouble. In 1300, Pope Boniface VIII attempted to enforce papal authority on kings, as previous popes had. When King Philip IV of France asserted his authority over French bishops, Boniface responded with an official document. It stated that kings must always obey popes. Instead of obeying the Pope, King Philip had him held prisoner in September 1303. The king planned to bring him to France for trial, but the Pope was rescued, but the elderly Boniface died a month later. In 1305 CE, Philip IV persuaded the College of Cardinals to choose a French archbishop as the new pope. Clement V, the newly selected pope, moved from Rome to the city of Avignon, in what is now France. Popes would live there for the next 69 years. The move to Avignon badly weakened the Church. When reformers finally tried to move the papacy back to Rome, however, the result was even worse. In 1378 CE, Pope Gregory XI died while visiting Rome. The College of Cardinals, a group of senior bishops that advised and picked the Pope, then met in Rome to choose a successor. An Italian had been chosen, Pope Urban VI. Many cardinals regretted their choice almost immediately. Urban VI's passion for reform and his arrogant personality caused the cardinals to elect a second pope a few months later. They chose Robert of Geneva, who spoke French. He took the name Pope Clement VII, or Anti-Pope Clement VII, because the problem was that the cardinals never got rid of Pope Urban VI. So for those of you keeping score, now there were two popes. The French pope lived in Avignon, while the Italian pope lived in Rome. Each declared the other to be a false pope, excommunicating his rival. This began the split in the church known as the Great Western Schism, or Papal Schism. Oh, schism means split or division. The Great Western Schism shouldn't be confused with the Great Schism of 1054 that split Christianity into Eastern Orthodox and the Western Roman Catholic Church. Anyway, in 1414 CE, the Council of Constance attempted to end the Great Western Schism by choosing a single, different pope. For those of you keeping score, now there were a total of 3 popes: the Avignon Pope, the Roman Pope, and now a third pope elected by the Council at Pisa. Yeah, where they have the Leaning Tower. Wait, what are those people doing? Oh, now I get it. Cool. With the help of the Holy Roman Emperor, the council forced all 3 popes to resign. In 1417, the council chose a brand new pope, Martin V, ending the Great Western Schism, but leaving the papacy greatly weakened and embarrassed. The papacy was further challenged by an Englishman named John Wycliffe. He preached that Jesus Christ, not the Pope, was the true head of the Church. Wycliffe also taught that the Bible alone, not the Pope, was the final authority for Christian life. He helped spread this idea by inspiring an English translation of the New Testament of the Bible. Influenced by Wycliffe's writings, Jan Hus taught that the authority of the Bible was higher than that of the Pope. Hus was excommunicated in 1412 CE. In 1414, he was seized by church leaders, tried as a heretic, and then burned at the stake in 1415. Wycliffe and Hus would influence later Christian reformers. Another embarrassment to the church was their inability to handle an epidemic that struck parts of Asia, Africa, and Europe in the mid-1300s. Approximately 1/3 of the population of Europe died of the deadly disease known as the bubonic plague. Unlike catastrophes that pulled communities together, this epidemic was so terrifying that it ripped apart the very fabric of society. The plague began in Asia, where it wiped out 2/3 of the population in some areas of China. Then, traveling trade routes, it destroyed populations of Muslim towns in Southwest Asia. In 1347, a fleet of Genoese merchant ships arrived in Sicily carrying black rats and humans. They carried fleas that were infested with a bacillus called Yersinia pestis, the bubonic plague, also known as the Black Death. It got the name from the purplish or blackish spots it produced on the skin. The disease swept through Italy. From there it followed trade routes to Spain, France, Germany, England, and other parts of Europe, as well as North Africa. Because people did not bathe, almost all had fleas and lice. In addition, medieval people threw their garbage and sewage into the streets. These unsanitary conditions became breeding grounds for more rats. The fleas carried by rats leapt from person to person, thus spreading the bubonic plague with incredible speed. Symptoms of the bubonic plague included painful swellings called buboes in the lymph nodes, particularly those in the armpits and groin. Ew. Sometimes purplish or blackish spots on the skin. Yikes. Extremely high fever, chills, delirium, and in most cases, death. Wait a moment, that's not death. This is death. That is a plague doctor. The unusual outfit had some characteristics that decreases the risk of infection from the plague. Gloves, coat, goggles, and a stick to keep people at a distance. The long beak was often stuffed with flowers to mask the stench of death. It's all sort of like the modern hazmat suits. Anyway, the bubonic plague took about 4 years to reach almost every corner of Europe. Some communities escaped basically unharmed, but in others, like many major cities, approximately 2/3 to 3/4 of those who caught the disease died. Before the bubonic plague ran its course, it killed almost 25 million Europeans and many more millions in Asia and North Africa. It wasn't the first time the bubonic plague struck, and it wouldn't be the last. In fact, it's still around today. Wait, it's still around today? Well, you can have that discussion in your biology class. Anyway, the economic and social effects of the plague were enormous. The old manorial system began to crumble. Some of the changes that occurred included these. Town populations fell, obviously. Trade declined, so prices rose. The serfs left the manor in search of better wages. Nobles fiercely resisted peasant demands for higher wages, causing peasant revolts in England, France, Italy, and Belgium. Jews were blamed for bringing on the plague. All over Europe, Jews were driven from their homelands or worse, massacred. The church suffered a loss of prestige when its prayers failed to stop the onslaught of the bubonic plague and priests abandoned their duties. The bubonic plague and its aftermath disrupted medieval society, hastening changes that were already in the making. The society of the Middle Ages was collapsing, and a century of war between England and France would be medieval society's final death struggle. I feel like I'm getting a fever. Maybe I have the plague. I'd better go see a doctor. Let's take a break.